At the end of the 20th century, an unassuming football team qualified for the Champions League, Europe's premier football competition. The team was owned and bankrolled by an infamous fugitive, a bank robber, a drug trafficker, an assassin, a politician, prison escapologist, ultras leader, sweet shop owner, and finally, warlord. 2 decades on, their story and his remains still scarcely believable. Željko Ražnatović was born into a military family in a barracks in Slovenia, then part of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. His father was a high-ranking colonel in the Air Force, but military discipline escaped Ražnatović Jr. By 14, he was purse-snatching and pickpocketing on the streets of Belgrade. By 17, he was in juvenile detention. At 19, he was upgraded to an adult jail for robbery, but he soon escaped to Europe, robbing as he went in London, Rome, Paris, cities in Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Belgium. He spoke 4 languages and had dozens of identities. He shunned alcohol, drugs, and smoking. And no one is certain, but it's thought that his nickname Arkan came from a name that he used from a fake Turkish passport. He allegedly killed his first man shortly afterwards, shooting the owner of a restaurant that he held up in Italy. It was the start of a decades-long one-man crime wave that would make him a feared and, to some, romantic figure back home, plus one of Interpol's most wanted men. And he specialised in bank robberies. One tale was of how Arkan robbed a casino in San Remo, arriving in a speedboat in a suit and shirt, just him and a gun, and walking out with a fortune. His life would often be halted by stretchers in jail, but he also became an expert jailbreaker. In 1979 alone, he escaped from a jail in Belgium during a guards' strike for better pay and conditions. He was then jailed in the Netherlands and soon escaped again before moving back to Sweden. There, Arkan and an accomplice dressed in expensive clothes entered a Stockholm courthouse to break out a member of his gang. The 3 shot their way free, smashing out of a first-floor window and disappearing. After being shot during a robbery in Germany in 1982, he escaped from hospital naked and robbed a guard of his clothes before vanishing. But he likely had help from the Yugoslav secret police, the UDBA, who'd recruited Arkan as an assassin in return for immunity whenever he got into trouble. It's thought that Arkan was involved in the execution of as many as 15 opponents and critics of the Yugoslav regime abroad. In 1986, he turned up back in Belgrade, rolling in cash, driving a pink Cadillac, and added to his formidable criminal empire: drug trafficking, protection rackets, smuggling, and prostitution, centered on a sweet shop he opened next to Red Star Belgrade's Maracanã Stadium. But Yugoslavia was changing. The economy was in the gutter, and nationalist tensions were on the rise. Slobodan Milošević's power was rising too. He would become president of Serbia by preaching a form of Serb ultranationalism that resonated, not least on the terraces of Red Star Belgrade, which Milošević rightly recognized as a powerful and dangerous constituency. Now, Arkan was a devout supporter of Red Star Belgrade and appointed head of the club's fan group, the Delje, to foster those ultranationalist sentiments in the right direction. You can see him prowling the touchline of the Maksimir Stadium when the ultras and fans of Dinamo Zagreb and Red Star Belgrade famously clashed in May 1990, a match that Croatian nationalists have called the first battle of Croatian independence. Under the direction of Milošević's interior minister, Radmilo Bogdanović, who was also on Red Star's board, Arkan started training those fans who showed the most potential, forming his Serb volunteer guard, his Tigers, with a core of several dozen Red Star ultras. "I insisted on discipline from the very beginning," Arkan later recalled. "I made them cut their hair, shave regularly, and not drink." And when the war came in 1991, it was paramilitary groups like the Tigers that gave Milošević plausible deniability for the atrocities that were to come. The Tigers first saw action in Vukovar in 1991, before spreading west across Croatia, murdering, looting, and raping as they went. The same pattern followed in Bosnia. Arkan claimed that the accusations were lies, and he was simply protecting Serbian civilians who'd also been massacred. And it was true that Serbs had been targeted too. The Tigers weren't the only militia. The UN estimated that there were 83 paramilitary groups operating at the time, 56 on the Serbian side, 13 on the Croatian, and 14 backing the Bosnian government. But Arkan's Tigers had the bloodiest reputation of them all. The photographer Ron Haviv famously captured the tigers in action in Bijeljina in northeastern Bosnia in April 1992. 48 mostly Muslim civilians were massacred. One of Haviv's photos, of a tiger swinging a boot into the head of a recently executed middle-aged woman, made the front pages across the world. Milosevic always denied that Arkan was under his patronage, claiming that he was no more than a simple sweet shop owner. But the US State Department believed that the tigers were responsible for thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of civilian and military deaths. And war was profitable for Arkan too. It's thought that he personally earned more than $50 million from looting Croatia and Bosnia, and made even more from smuggling when Serbia was under international sanctions. When the conflict ended in 1995, Arkan went about attempting to appear legitimate. He'd already been briefly elected to the Serbian parliament before starting the Serbian Unity Party. He married Serbia's most famous turbo folk singer, Sesca, and he thought that he could find legitimacy in owning a football club. He'd already briefly owned FK Pristina in Kosovo and was rebuffed when he tried to take over Red Star Belgrade. So, in 1996, he bought FK Obich, a minor club from a Belgrade district, for the ultimate form of reputation laundering. He changed the kit to yellow and black, like a tiger, and they were quickly promoted to the top tier. In the crowd, armed former members of the Tigers would shout abuse and intimidate the opposition. Arkan had somehow secured all of his coaching badges, so he was allowed in the dugout. He would stalk the touchline, threatening opposition players and even referees. The Serbian investigative show, Insider, claimed that one player, Nikola Lazetic, was allegedly kidnapped from his club, stuffed in the boot of a car and sold to Obich against his will. Lazetic refused to confirm whether or not that had happened. Referee Zoran Arsic claimed that after one game, Arkan stormed into his dressing room, slapped him in the face and told him that he wouldn't get out of the stadium alive. Another club president claimed that Arkan forced a gun into his mouth when he wouldn't hand over his stadium's deeds. At least a dozen club presidents were executed at this time, usually for their involvement in organised crime. There were stories of match fixing, players and coaches threatened with guns, and on one occasion, a sedative gas being pumped into the opposition's dressing room. Arkan was such an intimidating presence that when Red Star played, they chose to spend half-time out on the pitch, urinating on the sidelines to avoid bumping into him. So, FK Obich won the league in their first season back, beating Red Star by 2 points, and only losing a single game. In the process, they qualified for the Champions League in 1998-99. But this created several problems, not least having an accused war criminal involved in Europe's premier competition. UEFA moved to ban FK Obich, but Arkan got around it by transferring the presidency to his wife. He did not forget, though, and allegedly ordered the assassination of UEFA president Lennart Johansson. But with Sesca as president, Obich were now allowed to play in the Champions League. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague had secretly indicted him in 1997 for crimes against humanity, grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions, and violations of the laws or customs of war. The tribunal had also been tipped off that despite him being banned, Arkan was going to attend the games in heavy disguise. So the tracking arm of the ICTY, the Fugitive Intelligence Support Team, or FIST, would follow whenever Arkan's two teams played. They staked out German Lekren Stadium in Antwerp when Red Star played in 1997, monitoring CCTV, moving amongst the crowd and watching the exit gates, but to no avail. There was no sign of him at Obich's first Champions League match against Bayern Munich and Germany either, as Bayern thrashed them 4-0. Obich drew the second leg 1-1 in Belgrade and fell into the UEFA Cup, now the Europa League, where they were drawn against Atletico Madrid. There was credible intelligence that Arkan might be in Spain for the match too, but again, there was no sign. FK Obich might have made it to the Champions League a second time, but the 98-99 Yugoslav League would be cut short when NATO bombed Belgrade, to prevent, they said, massacres taking place in Kosovo. NATO specifically targeted Hotel Yugoslavia in Belgrade to kill Arkan, where he had a casino. But he escaped that too. However, his luck finally ran out on January the 15th, 2000. He was executed while sitting in the lobby of the Intercontinental Hotel in Belgrade. To this day, no one is sure who ordered the killing, although many believe it was ordered by Milosevic, in the fear that Arkan might cut a deal to escape being jailed in The Hague. Thousands attended his funeral, but without Arkan's patronage, FK Obich faded away, dropping down 8 divisions before going bankrupt and effectively out of business. Today, the empty stadium in Vračar stands as a faded reminder to Serbia's recent past, and of Arkan's position as the most controversial owner the Champions League has ever known. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.